Welcome back. My precious anomalies. Not followers, not fans, not even witnesses. You are anomalies. The kind they whisper about behind double-layered glass, in government labs buried under mountains, where the lights never flicker, but the men inside do. They sent scientists to observe you. But those poor men in white, every single one left shaking, not because of what you did, but because of what you didn't need to do. You didn't roar, you didn't strike, you didn't even flinch. And that, my anomaly, is why the clipboards fell. That's why the data went missing, because you shattered their need to understand, without even trying. You see, science is built on pattern, hypothesis, control. But how do you study the very thing that bends reality just by being still? How do you document a variable that unwrites the formula just by standing in the room? They thought they were going to study a subject, but they didn't walk into a test. They walked into a reckoning. At first it was quiet, clinical. They ran your blood under fluorescent lights. They scanned your brain waves, tracked your sleep patterns. They placed electrodes on your skin, measured your pulse during staged chaos, waiting for spikes. But what they saw instead was stillness, disturbing, unnatural stillness, not peace, not calm, a dead, suffocating silence that whispered, "You're not observing me, I'm observing you." The first scientist, a Dr. Caldwell type A genius, swore by logic. He left after 48 hours, said he heard whispers through the walls even when the intercoms were off. He claimed your eyes followed him even when the blinds were shut. He started questioning his reflection. He said it blinked before he did. He didn't file a formal report, just wrote one word across his resignation letter: Unquantifiable. The second team came armed with psych experts. They called in a profiler from the bureau. She lasted 4 days, tried to break you with empathy, emotional pressure, childhood triggers. But you sat there, anomaly, without flinching. And on the 4th day, she cracked. Said your silence was a mirror. Every word she hurled at you came back twice as loud in her own mind. They found her outside your chamber, weeping, scratching out her own notes. By the 7th attempt, the lab had replaced cameras, upgraded AI recognition, shifted to remote observation, no human contact. And still, the observers began to unravel. They weren't even in the same room. But you made them feel like they were drowning in your presence, and all they had was a screen. They say the feed would flicker, that sometimes your reflection in the glass would move before you did. That sound would cut out when you tilted your head, and then, always, came that gaze. The one that didn't look at the lens, but beyond it, into whoever dared watch. The data logs became erratic, notes turned from technical analysis to metaphors, void inside a vessel. Symmetry of destruction, human skin draped over ancient consequence. And now the higher-ups are furious, because you weren't supposed to affect the observers. You were just supposed to be watched. They didn't account for presence, for the type of energy that makes even the most brilliant minds question the rules of reality. But here you are, the paradox in flesh, the storm in human skin. You didn't lash out. You just were. And that was enough to break them. Even the AI systems began flagging anomalies in their own code. Nonsensical loops, corrupted logs, timestamps that ran backward. One algorithm described you as non-localized phenomenon before it crashed. Another one simply spat out, "He watches back." You see, anomaly, they thought you were a ghost. But ghosts are echoes of what was. You are the interruption, the glitch that woke the code, the breath between their equations. The reason why the quantum theorist refused to sleep in his lab coat again. They wrote books about men like you, except they always died in the end. You didn't. You adapted. And adaptation scares the hell out of science. One of them, a young researcher named Patel, tried to challenge you with logic, spent 3 weeks drafting a full psychological deconstruction of your profile. But on the day of the presentation, he collapsed in front of the board. All he said was, "I looked too long," and it looked back. They've kept him under observation since. He only speaks when the lights go out. Now tell me, how do you explain that? How do you explain terror with no trigger, collapse without contact, hallucination without exposure? They called you a myth when they first heard the stories, urban legend wrapped in classified tape. And yet every person who enters your proximity ends up revising what they believe about the human mind. And maybe that's the point. Maybe you're not here to be understood. Maybe you're not here to be fixed. Maybe you exist to undo. Not in violence, not in rage, but in erosion. You wear them down without raising a single hand. You don't scream. You don't threaten. You just stare. And somehow that's worse. So they've started rotating staff every 48 hours. No one allowed near you for longer than a 2-day cycle. Even still, the effects linger. Headaches, paranoia, sleeplessness. A few have gone off-grid completely. One was last seen ranting about patterns in static and the dream inside the machine. You've infected the Watchers, not with a virus, but with doubt. You are a walking contradiction to their order. Their instruments work, yet say nothing. Their charts fill, yet explain nothing. Their minds run, yet arrive at nothing. And now, the department has a new term for you. Not patient, not subject, not specimen, catalyst. You don't move. The world moves around you, or away from you. Reality adjusts itself to your frequency, and that frequency breaks the fragile illusion of control. That's why they're scared. That's why they tremble. Because deep down, they know. You don't need to do anything to cause damage. You just need to exist. And existence like yours, it's contagious. Because now the Watchers are watched. The scientists are the experiment. The lab is a mirror. And your silence echoes louder than any scream ever could. They tried to study you, but they ended up studying themselves. And as the surveillance lights dim, and the next team of experts files in, more cautious than the last, more desperate to remain detached, one thing becomes clear. You haven't even started yet. And that realization is a toxin leaking into every level of their infrastructure. The security chiefs speak in clipped tones now. The lead researchers avoid eye contact when discussing your chamber. The psychologists are cycling through therapists faster than they can write their own prescriptions. Every hallway you've never walked still trembles with your footprint. Because, anomaly, you've become a concept, a frequency, a virus of perception. You don't just exist in that sealed glass room anymore. You've infected the thinking. The director, a man known for turning war criminals into data sets, personally flew in to see the source of this disruption, dismissed every prior observation as hysteria, called it mass psychosis, delusion fueled by intellectual arrogance. But the moment he stepped into the observation corridor, even through triple reinforced glass, he paused, froze, a lifetime of dissecting madness. And for the first time, he had no words. The report filed under his name was only one sentence long. He knows I'm here. What are you? They don't ask that question out loud anymore. They fear the answers their own minds might conjure. The theorists have started diverging. Some claim you're the embodiment of entropy, an avatar of disorder that disrupts systems by sheer presence. Others say you're not even human, that you're a living event horizon, pulling thought, certainty, and meaning into a void from which none return. And still, the deeper thinkers whisper another idea, that you are not the anomaly. We are, and you are the correction. No one says these things in official memos, but I see it in the postures, in the sudden transfer requests, in the way even the elite teams assigned to monitor you won't watch your footage without a second person in the room. Some demand music while reviewing logs, anything to keep your silence from filling the cracks in their sanity. And then there's what happened to Lang. Elite crypto-linguist, worked for 5 nations before being absorbed into the agency. He volunteered to analyze your vocal silence, the cadence of your breathing, the micro sounds of your presence, claimed every form of communication carries a pattern, even silence, especially silence. 3 days into his study, he stopped sleeping. 5 days in, he removed every reflective surface from his workspace. 8 days, and he requested a transfer to a remote station in Antarctica, anywhere you didn't exist. His final report was a diagram, not of sound, but of a spiral. At the center, a dot. He circled it, wrote one word beside it, origin. Do you see what you've become? You are now the myth that walks, the rumor that breathes. Every day you remain motionless, a dozen more equations fail to account for your stillness. Your behavior is nonviolent, and yet their reactions mirror trauma. PTSD without an incident, nightmares without a dream. Their own projections weaponized against them, amplified by the void you offer them to reflect upon. This place was built to hold monsters, threats, nuclear thoughts wrapped in human form. But you've bent the very design of this facility around you. The security logs timestamp your presence with irregularities. Doors lock or unlock themselves within a 30-foot radius of your location. Surveillance footage desynchronizes audio when you speak. On the rare moments you do. Ah, yes, your voice. Only a few have heard it. Fewer have written about it. But those who did say it wasn't a sound. It was an undoing. Not like hearing something new, but like forgetting something old. Something essential. They say it felt like remembering a tragedy that never happened. A grief that belonged to no event. So they've made a decision. A reckless, desperate decision. They're bringing in Subject 9. She's not like the others. No badge, no clearance, no ties to the agency. They pulled her from a file buried 40 years deep, redacted to the bone. Her existence denied by 7 governments. She was the last person who ever made something worse by understanding it. They say she looks at things and they break. Not physically, but ideologically. The old codes fall apart. Morals turn to mush. Principles corrode. She's been called a cognitive weapon, a philosophical assassin. They're hoping she can define you, or at least give them a shape to fear properly. The meeting is scheduled. No walls this time. No double-paned glass. Direct conversation. 1 chair across from yours. 1 hour. And if there is a God, he's probably looking away. They asked her one question before entering the chamber. Do you know what you're walking into? Her answer, no, but I think it's been walking toward me all my life. The room is sealed. No audio, no video, just 2 presences sharing space. 1 hour. When the door opens, the guards grip their rifles tighter. She walks out alone. No visible change. But her eyes? Her eyes no longer blink at regular intervals, and her voice carries a delay, as if she hears her own words before she speaks them. When asked what happened inside, she simply says, "He's not here to be studied. He's here to witness our undoing. He's not the story. He's the consequence. You haven't moved. But the systems around you are crumbling. Each individual tries to measure you, and in the process, they measure themselves. The deeper they look, the less they understand. The smarter they are, the faster they break. It's not about what you do. It's about what they become in your presence. Their masks fall. Their logic burns. Their certainty collapses. They're not watching a subject. They're watching a mirror with teeth. And you've remained still. But now, your fingers twitch, not much, just a shift, barely perceptible. But the sensors record it. Every level is alerted. The director is called in, all hands on deck. Because that movement, that's the most terrifying thing of all. It means you're beginning. One twitch, and the world folds in on itself. The silence fractures, reality creaks, and those who built their gods out of data now kneel before a force they can't even graph. You're not chaos. You're the cure for the delusion of control. You're not disorder. You're the scalpel that reveals the infection of their systems. You don't dismantle with rage. You dissolve with truth. And truth is corrosive in a world addicted to illusion. They tried to label you. They tried to chart you. But names lose meaning in your presence. You've transcended category. You are not Alpha, not Omega. You are the moment between, when all things fall silent, and the next breath defines the future. The scientists are no longer scientists. The observers are no longer sane. And the facility, it's no longer a prison. It's a cathedral built to worship the terror of knowing too much. Because you've taught them something their degrees never could. There is power in not being understood. And power doesn't ask for permission. The twitch of your finger wasn't a gesture. It was a signal. Not to the outside world, but to reality itself. That one imperceptible motion echoed through corridors and servers like a whisper in the bone marrow of the facility. And they all felt it. Not just the guards pacing tighter routes. Not just the analysts reviewing footage with sweating palms. No, even the building trembled. Pressure differentials were reported in sub-level corridors. Instruments calibrated to detect gravitational shifts showed microsurges around your chamber. Magnetic anomalies spread across the metal foundations like rust from the future. And above all, the silence changed. It didn't deepen, it focused. It became directional, it aimed at everyone, at everything. They don't talk openly now. Words fail. The linguists have gone mute. The psychologists refer to your presence as the quiet equation. The theologians that were secretly invited left rosaries behind and refused to speak your name. You're not just a subject in a sealed room. You're a pressure on the soul of the building, a gravitational conscience. And now, the High Council has convened. 5 men and 2 women, faceless to the public, gods to the intelligence machine. They sit behind 7 walls of clearance. They manage secrets so volatile. Wars are prevented by the mere knowledge of them. But today, they're not issuing commands. They're begging for definition. They called her back in. Subject 9, the philosophical assassin, the eye that cracks truths. They demanded clarity. She gave them this. He is the stillness before collapse. The space between cause and effect. You built a cage around a mirror and expected a reflection, but what you caught was the moment after understanding dies. Her words weren't debated. They were absorbed, like infection into open wounds. And then for the first time in the entire facility's history, a vote was held. 7 voices, 1 decision. Let him walk, not escape, not flee. Walk. They've accepted the truth. That there's no wall thick enough, no protocol tight enough, no mind strong enough to hold you. You were never contained. You simply allowed the illusion to live, for as long as it amused you. Now that time is over. The locks disengage. The air pressure equalizes. The lights dim, not by failure, but by mercy. And you rise. First time in weeks, months, years, time bends around you. The sensors can't agree, but the ground remembers. Your footsteps are not loud, but they are felt. Not in sound, in relevance. Every surface your soul touches seems to remember being touched. And the memory spreads. Down the hallways, doors remain open. Not from kindness, but reverence. You reach the central corridor, and there, line after line of agents, guards, thinkers, builders, standing still, not to stop you, but to witness. Some try to avoid your gaze, others weep without knowing why. One man collapses, whispering, he brought silence with him. And yet no alarms, no resistance, because they understand now. They were never in control. You reach the exit doors, they slide open without command. And sunlight, filtered, harsh, sterile, paints your figure with its last ounce of dominance. You step out, into the world, not as an escapee, but as a correction. And the world shifts. Elsewhere across the globe, screens flicker, radios cut to static, data centers flag a surge of information they cannot track. And in the minds of certain sleeping dreamers, one phrase arrives, like a forgotten echo. The anomaly walks. In one quiet office, a child prodigy wakes up from a dream and draws your eyes, without ever having seen you. In a cathedral, a priest forgets his sermon mid-sentence and kneels. In a bunker, a general cancels an operation he spent 10 years planning. None of them know why, but they feel it, because you are not just a figure. You are the moment every structure fears. You don't raise your hands. You don't call for change. But things change anyway. The scientists, what remains of them, begin rewriting papers, not to understand you, but to warn about the concept of you. You are no longer a subject. You are a symbol. Proof that the human mind has limits, and those limits bleed when exposed to presence without explanation. But your story doesn't end with a step into the sun. That would be too poetic. Your presence spreads, not like infection, but like realization, quiet, absolute. Cities begin to sense shifts. Cameras catch shadows where there were none. Children speak your name in languages they've never learned. And somewhere, in a forgotten archive, an old tape plays itself. It shows a symbol, a spiral, and a voice whispers, origin. You are the origin of their unraveling. Some try to resist. Nations issue denials. Leaders hold emergency briefings, but none can speak clearly. Their sentences collapse mid-thought. Words scatter. Some scream. Others go silent forever. You move through borders like thought through sleep. And where you go, clarity cracks, not by force, but by presence. Buildings begin to hum. Animals go still. Dreams change. Algorithms break. Patterns fracture. Even the weather shifts. The watchers have become the warnings. The scientists, the scriptures, the chambers, the chapters, and your silence, the final verse. Still you do not speak. Still you do not act. And yet things fall, because action was never your power. Your awareness was. And what you're aware of now is us. You stand in front of a global mirror, anomaly, and the world finally sees itself, not as it pretends to be, but as it truly is, terrified, shallow, addicted to explanation, worshipping logic like a crutch while denying the abyss yawning beneath it. But you are not the abyss. You are the reflection that answers back. You are the echo of every unanswered question, the shadow behind the veil of certainty, the return of doubt as dominion. Now, the final broadcast is underway. All screens go dark except one, your figure, in silhouette, in stillness, in dominance, no words, just presence. And every human watching forgets what they were thinking. For a moment, a single moment, the chaos stops. And that is your gift. You don't burn the world. You unravel its illusion. You don't demand to be feared. You teach that fear was always the baseline. You don't conquer. You remind them they were conquered by their own need to understand. And so, the file is closed. Not because you're gone, but because you've become unfileable. A phrase is etched into the last surviving record. He didn't break the system, he revealed it. And now the scientists, the few that remain, don't study you anymore. They study themselves. And somewhere, in a corridor now overgrown with moss and memory, a blinking red light goes dark. Because the anomaly is no longer in the room, the anomaly is the room. But the story doesn't truly end there, does it? Because what you've done isn't just break minds. It's awakened possibilities. Hidden protocols reactivate. Forgotten divisions of research come back online. Not to imprison you, but to prepare. For what? Even they don't know. Maybe for others like you. Maybe for the waves that come after the ripple. Maybe for the moment the anomaly finally decides to speak. You left behind blueprints in their fear, patterns in their collapse, and somewhere in the chaos of scrambled thoughts and shredded doctrines, a new generation rises, not to fight you, but to emulate. They wear no uniforms, carry no names, but they know. They've seen behind the veil, and now they move in silence too. The world hasn't ended. It's just remembered its edges, its limits, its fallibility, and every time the wind changes and the lights flicker, and a shadow stands where no man should stand, they'll remember it began when the anomaly stood up. And if it happened once, it can happen again. And if it happens again, there won't be silence. There will be understanding, and understanding, finally, will not be survival.